So this is called A Baby Boomer Gets Indoctrinated in War Lies and Propaganda. I'm speaking about myself. Right down below the title, you'll see two stick figures. One is a man and one is a woman. That would be my parents. They were single, not married, during the period of time known as World War II. After the war, I will arrive, along with an entire generation called baby boomers. Now, my parents were propagandized in that they truly believed that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and that in that bombing of Pearl Harbor was the instigation of the entry of United States into the period of time we know as Second World War. So my mother and father absolutely were convinced that the Japanese bombed the ships that were kept by the United States in a place called Pearl Harbor, and then of course the war ends with the dropping of the A-bomb, this magical bomb that has magical properties to incinerate human beings. So they died believing all of that, and most likely I would die too believing all of that. However, I've had the wonderful experience to come under the tutelage of Dave Johnson, and that propaganda world no longer exists in my temple. So if you look at what's called the baby boomers, television has come into play, and by the time I'm a young child, there is a television set in our home, and I will watch some television. And by that I mean over a period of weeks' time, maybe at most say 4 hours over an entire week. And I had my, quote, shows to watch, okay? So that's me down there, and that's me watching TV, and I'm watching what? Theater drama. Now that's the key to this presentation. So what is the theater drama? Well, theater drama is divided into two basic categories. And those basic categories come from the Greco-Roman world, and the two categories are tragedy and comedy. Now, tragedy would be the type of propaganda that's going to be in front of my mother and father, and they will only be able to experience film in its fullest sense in the movie theater, because when they are still single, television sets are not in the homes. Television sets start coming into the homes in the 1950s. So for my mother or father to get a true visual propaganda film, basically they are going to the movie theater. Now there was plenty of propaganda on the radio, because radio was king at the time. So they are convinced of those features of D-Day, Battle of the Bulge, all of it, and they die believing it. But what about me? I'm a child, a baby boomer, and I can sit in front of a television set. So, rather than watching tragedy and horror films, I will be watching comedy. Now, I saw little to no horror films or tragedy films of World War II when I was a child, but I did see comedy. Now, the comedy films come approximately 20 years after the conclusion of the war hoax. And I said approximately. So I will sit in front of the television set and I will watch comedy in 2 theaters. I will watch comedy in the theater of the European War, and I will watch comedy in the theater of the Pacific War. So let me try to explain a little bit further. And that is war hoaxing with the comedy fashion takes place about 20 years after the end of a war. So when I'm a young child growing up and I have access to a television set, I will watch Hogan's Heroes and I will watch McHale's Navy. So Hogan's Heroes is your European theater, McHale's Navy is your Pacific theater. And again, approximately 20 years, because Hogan's Heroes will run 1965 to 71, and McHale's Navy runs 1962 to 1965. So it's kind of a marker if you take a half a generation and realize that's kind of when the comedy feature of war comes to play. So for example, the Korean War hoax, 1950 to 1953, add 20, gives you 1973, and I believe the movie MASH came out in 1972. So you're looking at about half of a generation. So this would be my parents' generation, and this would be my generation of baby boomers, but there's an overlap, and that's when I'm a child. So how do you get the hoaxes such as my parents right here yelling and screaming about the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the A-bomb? How do you get that into me? Well, down here, I'm watching theater drama, McHale's Navy, and Hogan's Heroes. Now, as a young boy, it doesn't really occur to me all this stuff that I'm presenting to you. And it just occurred to me today, and so I thought I would present it to you for your consideration. So once again, this would be the propagandization of another generation, and that would be, for me, the baby boomer. And my parents are convinced of the reality of the war, and they have things in mind like the bombing of Pearl Harbor, A-bomb. And you're not going to get to me with the horror films, but you will begin to get to me by watching the comedy films, such as Hogan's Heroes and McHale's Navy. So there you see it, tragedy and comedy, and how that comes later on the television set into the homes, and two aspects, European comedy and Pacific comedy, both coming under the category of what? Theater. And then you have the overlap of generations. My parents' generation and my generation starting in childhood, and then of course after my parents are gone, my generation goes on. But I will learn more about the war by watching the comedy, the Hogan's Heroes, the McHale's Navy. But it will never occur to me, why are they making fun of it? Well, the reason they're making fun of things is because it really is comedy, even though others believe it's tragedy. So you've got a choice to make. And most people go with this choice. But if you go back to the interview that Dave J. did with Jim Fetzer, he can't let go. He's got to hold on to the death motif and really, really, really believe that bombs are dropped, people are killed, and heroes exist, and they get medals for their heroic efforts. But the truth of the matter is what? Theater. As Dave would say, it's strategic relocation and controlled demolition. Now I add a third to that, intensive propaganda. And of course the propaganda never stops for any of the war hoaxing. So it will continue on throughout your lifetime. And the question becomes, do you want to accept the propaganda? Or will you realize that you too, in some manner or some fashion, have been brainwashed, like I was, and the brainwashing really occurred with the comedy shows, not the tragedy shows. So I'd like to take you to where truth can be found, and that is in God's holy word. Trust in His holy word. Don't trust in the liars of history. Don't trust in the hoaxers of history. Don't trust in what they present in the media. Trust what God presents to you in His holy word, the Bible. Thank you for watching.